Exams, papers, assessments, tests, whatever you call them, they don't work. Let me say that again. Tests don't work. And here's why. Tests are meant to be diagnostics which indicate how well someone has actually learned a course. But tests don't actually do that. Rather than testing knowledge, which is what people should be getting from a course, they test memory, how well someone can remember a bunch of facts and write them down in verbal terms on a piece of paper. To begin with, not everyone learns the same way. Tests rely on words, and so people who learn in a hands-on practical manner will have trouble expressing such knowledge on paper, even if they've genuinely learned something. Furthermore, education in general is a massive, dynamic, and constant learning process, and it's almost guaranteed that not all of it is going to be in the test. So you may have learned something incredibly useful and actually gotten something out of the course, but if it's not in the test, then that doesn't show at all. You can still fail even if you really did learn. Conversely, there are people who pass and don't learn. They simply study for what's on the test and nothing else. They won't bother to study it if it's not on the test. And that's because they think they'd be wasting their time learning something if it's not going to be tested, which is obviously not true. As I said before, education is a constant thing, and you're not going to learn much if all you do in class is ask, "Is this going to be on the test?" Limiting yourself to what is on the syllabus simply because it's the only thing that's going to be tested is not a very good approach to learning. At all. You're not really going to learn anything. Indeed, I know some people who forget everything they've learned once the test is done because they don't need it anymore. And that brings me to another problem with tests. The fact that some people seem to treat the test as more important than the actual course. When you get your report card, the majority of the mark which you get comes not from the 100 or so hours which you spent sitting in a classroom being taught, but rather from the 2 or 3 hours which you spent in an exam room doing a test, and I don't agree with that. As I've already discussed, tests are by no means an indicator of how well someone has actually learned, and so I don't think it's fair for tests to be used as the main measurement of learning. And one group of people who I think need to keep this in mind are the parents of school children. Now, I don't have any issues with my parents personally, but a lot of my friends tell me that their parents get very, very upset when they don't get 100% in a test. At which point I find myself thinking, why? Expecting your child to get 100% in every single test is like expecting an athlete at the Olympic Games to win a gold medal in every single sport. It doesn't happen. To begin with, as I said at the start of this video, tests are meant to be diagnostics, but it seems that in today's society, a lot of parents seem to treat tests as competitions, where their kids are meant to get perfect scores of 100. They're not. It's inevitable that children will make mistakes, because those mistakes are what give you the diagnosis of what they're good at and what they're not so good at. Without mistakes, tests would serve no purpose. In fact, on numerous occasions, I can recall my teachers telling me that they deliberately make the tests hard so that no one is going to get 100, because they don't want anyone to get 100. Similarly, using class rankings as a yardstick for individual performance doesn't really work, because class rankings are entirely dependent on how everyone else does in the test. You can still come 26th in a class out of 30 even if you've beat a personal best, simply because the rest of the class did better than you. That doesn't change the fact that you did better than you've done. And this leads me to another problem. The fact that some parents seem to think that if their child isn't doing well in the test, it's because they're not trying hard enough, and that this can be remedied by punishing them or training them to do better. No. Bad idea. Doesn't work. For those parents who think that grounding kids for getting a D is going to make them do better, what? Do you really think you're gonna make your kid do any better by punishing them? No, you're just gonna be creating a lot of angst towards yourself from your kids, and at the same time, they're going to be too scared of you to tell you anything useful. And you're also going to be placing a lot of unneeded stress upon them, because come exam time, they know that they're going to get punished, and they can't do anything about it. Because most of the time, when kids do badly, it's not because of a lack of trying, but rather because they are physically or mentally incapable of doing any better. And look, I'm aware that some kids really don't try, and that most kids have room for improvement, but you can only go so far before you start forcing that improvement rather than encouraging it. Trying to force a child to do better is like trying to get water out of a dry sponge. Nothing is gonna happen no matter how hard you squeeze, and sooner or later you're gonna do something to hurt the sponge. And really, there should be no need to try and squeeze more knowledge out of your kids if they're not doing well in tests, because if they're not doing well in a test, that's it. The test is showing you that they're not so good at whatever they're being tested at. The problem with tests, as I mentioned earlier, is the fact that for some people in today's society, the test matters more than anything, more than the school, more than the actual course, more than the well-being of the child sometimes. That's obviously not a good thing, but because of the great importance which is placed upon tests, that view is held by quite a few people. And look, I'm not saying that I've got a better system than the one currently in place, But at the same time, that doesn't change the fact that there are some problems with the current system. In the end, the only way you can truly test someone is through themselves. Only the person who actually did the learning will be able to accurately tell you whether or not the course they partook in actually taught them anything. And ultimately, the greatest test which any of us can ever hope to pass is the test which we all undergo, regardless of who we are or what kind of an education we receive. The test is called life, and in the words of John Green, everything will be on it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Without mistake... Oh, I forgot the background.